which has been a partner of CICTE's Security for Major Events program since 2010. She will introduce our panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, Cindy Smith.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'd like to join all the other speakers who have thanked the Organization of American States for hosting us here today and this evening for our dinner, and for the ICSS for organizing this regional conference, and for inviting us at UNICRE to be part of this event. Second, I took notice that there is a very high level of participation from the governments and international organizations from all over the world. This is evidence of a growing willingness to foster international cooperation and develop the international structures that will significantly contribute to the protection of major sporting events in the future. I'm particularly glad to have the opportunity to chair this panel because it reflects UNICRE's vision in this field. Major events indeed are a window of opportunity that provides occasions to improve the standard national security policies while protecting and boosting socioeconomic development. In this context, UNICRE launched in 2003 the International Permanent Observatory on Major Event Security, which you heard mentioned earlier this morning. It received express backing by Resolution 2006/28 of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. This resolution invites the United Nations member states to request the assistance from UNICRE in preparation for security planning of major events. UNICRE assists member states to design strategic plans at the regional level, setting up informal and voluntary networks of security professionals for the development of common standards, the exchange of experience and best practices, and legislation models, and the elaboration of specialized technical tools, such as the IPO planning model. Within the Major Events Security Program, UNICRE has developed consortia of members in the Americas in cooperation with the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism of the Organization of American States. Thanks to this mechanism, UNICRE and the CICTE have already assisted several member states providing mentoring services and training to host safe, secure, and incident-free major events. The adoption of such regional mechanisms have demonstrated to be particularly effective in addressing the practical needs of members, maximizing the impact in achieving a legacy of regional cooperation, exchange of the best practices and resources, as well as policy coordination. Additionally, we have had real outcomes, a rare event in programming, and lives saved. Coordination is a key factor in planning and organizing a major event, and the contributions from many international agencies and stakeholders is extremely important. To this end, I'm glad to introduce my distinguished colleagues as part of this panel. If you want to come up, Mateusz Benderski, is the Chief of the Partnerships and Resources Mobilization Unit in the Inter-American Development Bank and formerly with the World Bank. Giovanni DeCola, Special Advisor to Multilaterals Department at the headquarters in Geneva of the International Labor Organization. And Dmitry Vlasis, Chief of the Corruption and Economic Crime Unit at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in Vienna. This panel is going to be a little bit different than the others in that this is a test, and I have the questions, and I'm hoping you have the answers. but better, and how?
Okay. Well, to respond straightforward to your direct question, as you asked so kindly, I think it does not boost employment directly, but it does at the level of building infrastructure to basically execute bids towards major events. But it does boost skills tremendously throughout the year, particularly as it relates to volunteerism, as well as during the games, whatever they are. Be games at the regional level, be at the national level, be of course the global games of which we talked about. Not only Olympic Games, but major sport events, FIFA Cup and other world championships. What I do believe is that we did not tap sufficiently into the skills that are actually related to the sports for the youth. And I think this is where this conference is going to make a difference, because it is timely and it is needed. I think that so far we have been working along in parallel, and we don't share in a way which is multidisciplinary. And I think that what comes out of the discussion and the conversation this morning and this afternoon is precisely the fact that we need to work more cohesively and coherently towards a multidisciplinary approach. In that regard, I think not only the skills would be boosted, but also there would be a direct correlation between skills and jobs.
Thank you. And as a former professor, I give that an A+. Do you agree? Next, Matthias, when it comes to partnerships, what does each entity bring to the table, and what are the benefits of working with, for example, governments or companies or multilateral organizations like the IDP?
Well, thank you, Cindy. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting us here. Certainly, let me explain a little bit what we do in our office, which is actually what the name implies, partnerships. So we do work with the whole range of actors that you just mentioned. And we work with those actors because we believe that what we do, we cannot do alone, and we need others to succeed and to make, to actually create impact or generate the impact that we're looking for in our projects. Very briefly, and to be also concise and precise and go into the core of the question, I think every actor brings something to the table, and when let me say also that we look for sports as a convener for the things that we do. We believe sports actually convene youth at risk, and kids and mothers as well into something, and then we can work on development issues for them. The bank does, as you all know, promote social and economic development in the region, and we believe sports is definitely a channel, one instrument to get them to the table. Two words that I think governments bring to the mix, and it's scalability and sustainability. We've been working with sports for a long time, but sustainably, the IDB has been working with sports for the last 11 or 12 years. And we believe that we are actually getting more and more responses from governments asking us to include some sports components into the mainstream projects that the IDB offers. So, just to name a couple of examples, or one particular example, we're working on a citizen security project in Costa Rica that actually has a large component, a sports component into it, built into the project. The private sector is a different case, and we do have a lot of private sector partners, and that's something that our office actually leads in the bank, the engagement with private sector. The private sector has the sort of the flexibility and riskiness approach that organizations like ours or governments usually cannot do. They're more innovative. They can take on riskier projects. They have enough innovation in their DNA, and they have that because they need to be innovative in order to create more value for their own businesses. So we've been working with several companies, and I can name a few, on various different angles of projects that include a sports component. So we're working with Visa, for example, in a sports component project that has on financial inclusion to it. And a couple of people in the previous panels were talking about social inclusion, and that's exactly what the companies are looking for when they intervene in this riskier, I would say, or more at risk areas in which our sports projects are located. As per the IDB, I'm not going to create a commercial out of this, and we bring some proven methodologies. We bring to the table some impact evaluation, which is so important in all these sports-related activities. You know, we bring some implementation capacity, and as per NGOs, foundations, and others that join at the base of this and who actually execute our projects or some of our projects, they bring exactly that, the know-how, you know, the context, the networks, the working in communities, you know, the experience of these communities. So I think I'll leave it at there, and you can ask me, we can talk a little bit further later.
Okay, great, thank you. And also an A+, which sets you up, Dimitri.
It does, yes.
It does, yes. So let me give you your first question. Can a major sporting event be successful in terms of sustainability, legacy, and efficiency if solid anti-corruption measures are not in place?
Thank you, Cindy. I hope I will get credit for putting my notes away.
Okay, duly noted.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. When we finished the elaboration of the UN Convention Against Corruption, this was a few years ago, and we started working towards promoting its implementation. We realized that we were encountering a number of areas, a number of issues, which had been left largely unexplored over the years, particularly from this angle. From the angle of how to ensure, how to use this global instrument, the only global instrument against corruption, in order to provide safeguards for major sporting events. We realized that the risk of major public events, if I can broaden it just for a moment, the risk of major public events, of which sporting events are perhaps the best example, is very large. You have invariably events that require large investments of public funds. They require large infrastructure development done with public funds by and large. It is done, even if the preparations start early, somehow these events end up being done in a hurry. So very tight deadlines. And invariably also, because of the intersection between the sporting world and the rest of the government, they are done not using existing institutions. There are institutions that are created ad hoc for the purpose. So because of all these factors, there are a number of risks that are heightened, especially in the area of at the same time, there's no risk, there's no challenge without opportunity. And I think that major public events can and must leave a legacy also in the area of integrity, transparency, and anti-corruption. They can and they must. In view of all this, we developed and launched 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, in the margins of the Conference of the States Parties, which is the body that looks at the implementation of the convention, supports the implementation of the convention, a major publication. It is called The Strategy to Safeguard Major Public Events Against Corruption, using the convention for that purpose. It analyzes the risks. It provides guidance as to what to do in order to identify, understand, and mitigate those risks. What institutions need to be established, what legislation needs to be put in place, what regulation. And then there is an annex to this, which is a detailed checklist that countries can use when they decide to host a major public event. We're hoping that this would be useful. We're hoping that, to answer more specifically your question, that we can create a situation in which countries take the issue of anti-corruption very seriously, as they should, especially in the area of major public events, and realize that by safeguarding against it, they are not only safeguarding the resources that they are investing, but they're also creating a legacy for the future and help develop what is actually the benefit that the major public event, one of the benefits and the major benefit that a major public event can bring to a country.
I think he has achieved it as well. I have more questions, but I wondered if the audience would like to ask any. You're at my mercy then.
There's one down there.
There is one. There is one clear in the back. Can we have a microphone? Thank you. Raise your hand again.
Nuevamente, Ministro de Deportes de Honduras, Orlando Ponce. Quiero felicitar al panel, este es un tema muy interesante que está vigente con respecto a los casos, por ejemplo, de corrupción que se han destapado últimamente en diferentes eventos internacionales. No sé, quisiera escuchar sus comentarios sobre lo que ha hecho, por ejemplo, el FBI con respecto al tema de la FIFA y la investigación de sobornos y actos de corrupción en los que se han visto involucrados una serie de directivos que han manejado el fútbol a nivel de la FIFA en los últimos años. Igualmente me gustaría saber sobre qué avances se pueden hacer en el tema de el arreglo de los partidos. Muchas ligas de fútbol, y también se está investigando en otros deportes, también están involucradas en el tema del amaño o el arreglo de partidos, hablando de jugadores, entrenadores, árbitros. Me gustaría escuchar la opinión del panel. También en el tema de la sede de los eventos internacionales, como el caso de los mundiales y de los Juegos Olímpicos. Y un tema que es para nosotros muy importante es la investigación de los fondos, porque se maneja de que muchas instituciones deportivas son financiadas a través del narcotráfico. Equipos de fútbol y de otros deportes que son financiados por el narcotráfico. Yo quisiera que nos hablaran de ese tema para ver qué tipo de avances se pueden hacer o conclusiones que se pueden sacar de este panel que ustedes tienen. Creo que varios países tienen ese problema, donde además del problema de la parte de la política, en el tema de los equipos de deportes, también se habla mucho de financiamiento de campañas por parte del narcotráfico. Muchas gracias.
Panelist?
Want me to go first?
Sure, Dimitri.
Three points in response. Regarding the first point about the recent scandals and especially with FIFA, I think that first of all, my sense is that we are only beginning to get a glimpse of how serious the situation is there. And therefore, you would allow me to make, again, what would be preliminary comments, primarily for that reason, but also because of the limited time that we have. I think that, you know, when we started our collaboration with ICSS and with the International Olympic Committee, and I started attending meetings, all of a sudden I realized, and I caught myself thinking, my God, these people speak a different language. And I speak about the sporting world in general. They speak a different language than the one that I was used to, the one of policy making and enforcement in crime prevention and criminal justice. Those two worlds were completely different. And one of the key challenges, I think, that also ICSS has faced over the years of its operation, still facing, and also the other organizations, including mine, is how to bring those two worlds together. First of all, make them understand each other, and then as a first necessary condition of working together, because they must work together. And I think that the situation in the world of sports, because now we are talking about FIFA, but there have been other sporting events. I remember in particular sporting incidents. I remember in particular an analysis of the Commonwealth Games that were held in India and how they were marred by corruption by the person, the commissioner who had been assigned to investigate that case, and what he had found, which was really extraordinary. And I think that this is something that to a large extent, what is happening there might have been expected. It might have been expected by the fact that these are large sporting organizations that very jealously guard their autonomy, and they insist that the best way forward is by self-regulating. And any attempt to point out that they are no longer purely sporting organizations, but they are, to a large extent, multi-billion-dollar businesses, is perceived as an attempt to violate the autonomy and the independence of sport. I think that we have to overcome that and I think that the FIFA scandal is going to give us that opening to see what type of regulation needs to be put in place and how we can bridge the gap that exists right now. There are a number of other things, coming to the second part of your question. There are a number of other things that this convergence of the two worlds can help us solve. A number of other issues. You mentioned the involvement of organized crime. Indeed, there is evidence to suggest that that organized crime is heavily involved in illegal betting and in match fixing. And it is amazing also how big that industry is. Therefore, how lucrative it can be for money laundering, for profit, you know. So we, together with the International Olympic Committee, we did a small, let's say, a small research piece in terms of criminal legislation on match fixing and illegal betting. You would be surprised to hear how few countries have legislation in the area of criminalizing this type of activity. Therefore, there is another area where a lot of work needs to be done. It is not only the Convention Against Corruption which is applicable there, it is also the Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime that was mentioned by Professor David this morning, earlier this afternoon, which is applicable and can be a very powerful tool in order to tackle problems like match fixing and so on, and the involvement of organized crime. I hope I have answered the questions.
Yeah, well, I would like to respond in another way, not covering the same area, but I think that corruption is also a result of lack of capacities and capabilities in given context, and particularly when it comes to facing the challenges of organizing a big event with standards that are not always fully ruled out. In other terms, I take the example of fundamental rights at work, and particularly labor matters. It would be much easier if in the bids proposed by the IOC, a reference strict to international labor standards, like conventions that my colleague was referring to, would be indicated, because that would have two effects. Number one, to promote legislation whereas it is needed at the level of the countries concerned. And second, it would also facilitate exchanges and knowledge sharing not only with international institutions, but between countries. And I think that would increase the capacities and the capabilities. And when I refer to capabilities, some of our colleagues this morning were including knowledge, skills, competencies, and capacity to share. And I think that is a basket of tools that are required to face games or major events, including local sport events of a certain standard.
Mateus?
Voy a contestar en español porque la pregunta fue en español. La verdad que digo, no quiero referirme al caso puntual, particular, específico de FIFA o relacionado a eventos deportivos, sino más bien que a la corrupción se puede dar en diversos ámbitos. El banco tiene hacia adentro reglas muy rígidas de anticorrupción, por supuesto, para nuestras propias operaciones, pero también hacia afuera, en apoyo a los gobiernos de la región, tenemos, por ejemplo, para nombrar un par de herramientas, un fondo de transparencia, antes llamado Fondo Anticorrupción, hoy Fondo de Transparencia, con el cual hemos hecho muchísimas intervenciones con nuestros países, 26 países miembros en el Caribe y en América Latina. Tenemos también, hablando de corrupción, hablando de crimen organizado, también un fondo de transparencia, en el cual también tenemos donantes, a otros países donantes en el mismo. Y tenemos varios grupos dentro del banco que se ocupan básicamente de esto, ¿no? El último de los fondos que les mencionaba es básicamente un fondo que apoya a gobiernos de alguna manera con políticas públicas que, yendo al caso puntual que se hablaba del match fixing, eventualmente podría ayudar en una política para aquellos países que no tienen una política o una ley para un poco combatir potencialmente este delito. También tenemos un grupo dedicado en el Banco de Integridad que se dedica justamente a ver temas específicos de integridad, y nosotros particularmente en lo que toca a nuestra oficina tenemos también reglas muy claras de integridad cuando nos asociamos a otras organizaciones, a otras empresas o fundaciones. That's all. Sorry.
Excellent. We have time for one more question.
Good afternoon. Bill Race from New York University's Center for Enterprise Preparedness. Firstly, fascinating. Thank you very much to all of you speakers. I was going to particularly direct this, at least initially, to Mr. Bendersky, particularly with the banking perspective that you bring to the equation. I think much of our conversation, at least ebbs and flows of it during the course of the day, have been talking about what is the value, if you will, of investing in sports. And those are both some quantitative responses, optimally we'd like to see on that, and probably certainly a lot of qualitative responses to social society. But perhaps with your banking hat on, I was going to ask you, what do you see within your own activity to be some of the more perhaps effective or promising methodologies to value the impact of sport on an economy? And in particular, I'd also like, you referenced earlier your collaboration with Visa. Any big data opportunities here with respect to looking at the financial transactions that perhaps follow in and around sporting activities that might help us tease out some of that? Thanks.
Thank you very much for the question. That's a very long answer question, so I'd be very, very happy to continue the conversation outside with you. We're talking about sort of two perspectives here. One is the bank is it's an investor, has shareholders that are the countries in the region, Latin America and the Caribbean. So we program, for example, investment in major infrastructure when there is a sporting event and when there is none. But they always have to be sound investments, also from the bank's perspective. They have to be sound in every way, but mainly with safeguards, social and environmental safeguards that we request that they're put in place when we support a project. So that's on the sort of infrastructure side, what the bank invests along the lines of any any country that is doing any event, but actually in the context of a request of a country for infrastructure in general, being or not a host country for an event. On the sports part of the question, whether we invest at the request of governments, and we're seeing more and more interest in including this sports components to social, citizen security projects, or gender projects, or education projects, or health projects that include a sports component to it. There is data, and I can share some of the data. We've done a study with Michigan University, on social investment return of a sports project in Brazil, and it ended up being $1.5 for every dollar spent on social investment return, as measured by this group of students with the professor that went to Brazil to measure a project that we have that is called To Win, a Ganar, which is an employability project. So we use sports as a convener. We bring youth with the excuse, perhaps, or the distraction of actually playing sports and being, we're talking about at-risk areas, and bringing these people to teach them life skills, to actually engage them in different activities that will make them learn and eventually be employed at the end of a program. So this is a 3 to 6 months program in which we bring this youth to our centers, sports centers, and at the end of a program, 70% of those, and this is been applied in many countries, and we can go into the detail later. We achieved a 70% rate of employment at the end of a program in several countries, Ecuador, Brazil, and some others. So there are some measures. Now, sports as a development avenue, there's not that much data in the world. And we're collecting the data because we believe that's the only way to sustain this, is to prove that this actually works and has an impact. So as I'm speaking, there is 4 or 5 projects that are related to sports and social inclusion, or have these components on financial inclusion, that are being measured. Now, complete measurements with economic regressions and impact evaluations will be ready, perhaps, I would say, in a couple of years. We don't have the full data. There are some organizations that are starting to measure this, and I'm talking only about these programs or similar type of programs. They're starting to measure this, so there might be some advances out there. But it's very new. The whole field of sports for development, it's a new field.
Thank you. I believe that each of our speakers has given us some wisdom, and I know I've taken away a few notes, but our time is up, so if you want to ask them more questions, I'm sure you can catch them this evening at dinner, and if you'll help me thank them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oops.
Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Wonderful job. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a full day of very interesting discussions and experts. We have 2 more panels left. Is that right to say? 2 more panels left. And our next panel will be on financial integrity. It will be chaired by American political commentator James Carville. Please join me in welcoming James as the moderator, and the rest of the speakers as well. Thank you. Okay, all right, great. I'm sorry. I just want to clarify that this will actually be our last panel before dinner, and wanted to make sure to communicate that while we have dinner or during dinner, we'll go ahead and have the final panel. So after this, we will break for dinner and continue from there. Right? Right. Okay.
Well, thank you all very much. First of all, it's a big honor to be here in this historic building. I don't know if you realize, but